And we get to start at a really cool place. But before we start, I just made an announcement, and now I want to make it on the recording that next Monday, the God is Mother class will start at 5:30 instead of 6. All right, so now what we're jumping into here is a talk about the nature of divine love and its relationship to the gunas. And so uh, we're going to get some really beautiful things going on here. I was sitting there trying to contemplate the gunas, trying to think of what to do with them, and maybe Mother will come to our rescue here in a minute. So M is asking the Master Sri Ramakrishna a question. He says, "Sir, what is the nature of the divine love transcending the three gunas?" Now, these gunas are interesting. Vivekananda sort of talks about them as elements. They're
Swami, what
talked about
page
as
are you on? What page or the date? I'm sorry.
The date is going to be the December 17th, 1883.
Yeah, okay.
Probably about a page and a half into it.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, no worries. This is what we're about. So these gunas, they're talked about as elements. They're sort of talked about as building blocks of Maya. They're basically that three components that are behind that from which you can sort of reconstruct or describe Maya. We talk about tamas as being inertia, laziness, sloth, kind of undoing, decay. And we talk about sattva being a balance, a maintenance, where rajas and tamas are in balance with each other, and that's a state of sattva. And rajas is the state of action, and it's used to kind of help us decide which path to take. It's used that way also. So if you're a very rajasic person, probably you'd be better on a karma yoga path, or of course bhakti is there for anybody. But then if you're more of a sitter, more tamasic, then maybe a raja yoga or a jnana yoga, because you like to sit, you like to think, you like to stillness is your thing. So you can use them that way. But what they actually are, it's kind of escaped me. So it's sort of, I see them as sort of a quasi spiritual slash what? Um, I'm waiting for the word. I'm trying not to do a cover up here. Philosophical element, perhaps a philosophical element of things, but they should always be in balance. And he says here, the first thing he says, attaining that love, this divine love, the love of God, which all of us will be able to attain as soon as we get rid of our ego, which actually is formed from the gunas. He says, attaining that love, the devotee sees everything full of spirit and consciousness, right? And the two first qualities of spirit and consciousness that come to mind to me are boundlessness. The spirit can't be boundaried, consciousness can't be boundaried. So the first thing that you do, this love, of course, this love is the unity. First of all, when we all become that one without a second, love is the unity that is the oneness. Jesus talks in his last prayer, his final prayer on earth. He's making a prayer for the unity of mankind with God. And he says, and love is the cord that will bind that unity together, that bind that unity into a oneness. And of course, the nature of God. So the nature of that unity is love. One of the fundamental aspects of God is that divine love. So attaining that love, the devotee sees everything full of spirit and consciousness. To him, Krishna is consciousness. So the highest ideal, the personal God is consciousness. And his sacred abode is also consciousness, right? Even where Krishna lives is consciousness. The devotee too is consciousness. So we are also consciousness. Everything is consciousness. Very few people attain such love. So this notion of just this oneness, we see no boundaries there, because to rise above the gunas, so he hasn't mentioned the gunas yet, that's in the next sentence, but that rising above the divisions that egoism has caused, bring us into this unity of consciousness. I like to think about it in the dream. If you could see the dream as it was, you would just see a bunch of mind stuff. Whatever mind uses, like right now, if I say, think of a heart, right? And all of you are thinking of a heart. Whatever that heart is right now, it's made of consciousness, right? You're seeing a heart, but that heart is made of mind stuff. Mind stuff, I'm going to say, is consciousness. And so you would see everything in your dream would the boundaries would fall away, so it would become all one thing, and that one thing would probably look something very similar to what Ramakrishna saw in the shrine when he had his realization moment, an ocean of consciousness, glistening silver.
Would you just go over this? Mind stuff cannot be consciousness, right? Because mind is not consciousness.
Well, I would say mind is consciousness. Mind with objects in it is consciousness. Mind with no objects in it would be awareness. But mind, because pure mind and Brahman are one and the same. And so, yeah, mind contains consciousness. Is it consciousness? Is God consciousness? Yeah. Well, consciousness has objects in it, so Shakti is consciousness. But the singularity, you can't really describe it.
I don't think the mind and the consciousness are the same thing, though, are they? I mean, the mind literally is a product of the body and matter. I mean, or at least in real gross form, isn't it?
No, not at all. Ramakrishna says pure mind and Brahman are one and the same. Pure mind and Brahman are one. So mind, we're not talking about brain when we say mind. We're talking about, what are we talking about? Mind.
Yes. We had this same discussion when we did Nisargadatta. And I think when we say mind, usually we mean the unpure mind. And we have to distinguish between when you are saying mind is consciousness, you're talking about pure mind, whereas the regular mind that we all have is the not yet pure mind.
Right, but it's still consciousness. Yeah, it's just got consciousness. There's a 3-tier step down. There's awareness, which is consciousness with no objects in it, which would be pure consciousness. Pure consciousness and awareness are one and the same, and that is divine. That could be pointed at as God or godlike. And then there's mind with objects in it, Shakti, and that's active mind. Impure mind means vibrating mind, disturbed mind. We call it impure mind. But again, just like with Sri Nisargadatta, when I said that, I don't like calling Shakti impure mind. But generally, that's what it is. The mind is the power of God. It is the container of Maya. It's that through which we experience Maya, and it's the mind that we make impure by thinking ourselves separate and apart from it, from its wholeness, from its oneness. And that is what causes the disturbance in our local mind and creates objects, creates things that are other than us, from which our Maya, our individual Maya, is built. But it's all mind stuff. And even all the stuff that you're looking at right now in the room, frankly and honestly, you're seeing the same things you see in your dream. Because we've talked about this ad infinitum before. You're not looking, if you're looking at your hand right now and you think that you're seeing your hand, you are not. You're seeing your mind's symbol for your hand. Because the light that's reflecting off of your hand and getting to your eye does not go to your brain. It gets encoded into nerve information, however that's done, some biochemical process. And then that biochemical process is what gets to the brain. And the brain, that section of the brain that it arrives at, knows that it came from the visual cortex. I'm using words bigger than what I know they mean. But it comes from the eye, and then that section of the mind creates the symbol for what that represents, for it decodes that information and creates a symbol. So actually, you're not seeing your hand. You are seeing your mind's symbol for the information that is your hand, right? And so what is your hand? Your hand is right now is made of the same stuff as your dreams. And so you're looking at a dream hand, even though you're in a waking state. You're still not seeing the things as they are. You're still seeing the things as your mind presents them. And so your mind is reconstructing a symbol out of its own stuff, whatever that might be, however it manages to do that, to give you a hand. And so everything that you're seeing right now is exactly that. Everything that, not just seeing, everything you're touching, hearing, tasting, and smelling at this moment also is just a symbol for that which actually seems to own that taste, touch, sound, or smell. We don't really know, because that's one of the very interesting things to me, and one of the reasons that I'm a Vedantist is because there's no way to verify where that information is coming from. We have no idea if there's an outside world, and the sages tell us that in fact there isn't one. And so here we are.
Which, this has often led me to the question of, like, let's say, like, I've never seen Cookie before, never seen you. And so therefore I have no preconceived notion of your appearance or what you're like. And so how do I get the appearance of you that I get? Like, why is it what it is versus something else? So it's like, you're talking about that information. There's some other information, I believe anyway, or theorize, that is coming from some thing that we're not consciously aware of that helps to form that image in the mind. Because like you say, we're not actually really seeing anything. And so why do people appear the way they do to us?
Well, I'm going to go one step farther into weirdness, and then we probably ought to pull out of this conversation because it will go on for the rest of the week. Your view of what I look like and another person's view of what I may look like may not, in fact, be the same. We would have no way of knowing. It's like this occurred to me walking around the bog in Olima one time, where I was looking at a flower, and it was a very beautiful blue color, kind of blue purple. And I was looking at it, and it occurred to me, I wondered if everybody that looks at that flower sees the same color. We're all going to be calling it blue, right? So we're all going to be pointing at it and say, oh, look at that blue flower, because whatever color we see as a representation of blue, we've been told that was blue, and we've always referred to it as blue because the person couldn't get into our mind to see that our mind symbol was actually red, but the person whose mind symbol shows blue as red is always going to call it blue and point at it and say, look at that blue thing, even though they're seeing a red thing in their mind. I'm going to see maybe a green thing, but I'm going to call it blue also. And it was pointed at by my kindergarten teacher and told that it was blue. So to me, green is blue. And we have no way of fixing that mess. We have no way of fixing that mess.
So think about this. And so, like a woman, and she has a baby, and it's the ugliest baby you ever seen. But but to her, it just sparkles her eyes.
Yes.
And like with me with toads, people are like, ew. And I look at them, I'm just like, oh, And so, like, your mind is, creating your world.
Yes.
Your perception of people, but my whole thing is there has to be something else forming it also.
No, I don't. Well, maybe I'll leave that up for us to figure out in time. But I don't feel the necessity for something else.
Not forming it, but there has to be some kind of other information.
Okay. When you find it, let me know. That'd be great. All right. So this attaining that love, the devotee sees everything as spirit and consciousness. So that's seeing things as they are. you would see that ocean of light of pure consciousness that Ramakrishna saw the temple to be. The forms and separations and boundaries would disappear, because I'm pretty sure that egoism is the thing that causes boundaries. That sense of separateness from the whole creates the need for a boundary, and that's what egoism provides. It's what keeps you separate and apart from everything, and it's also the thing that makes sure that that separation is high enough and thick enough that you feel safe in your little make-believe nest of me and mine, right? So that you can sit on a ball of rock screaming through the universe at unknowable angles, directions, and speeds, and feel safe. Feel like, oh, I'm here and I'm home and everything is fine. When here and home is hurtling through space with no driver at the helm. And so egoism is this functioning safe little safe house that we've created of things that we imagine ourselves to know that we take security in. And we live in there, and that ego is constantly reinforcing that notion. So anytime that the ego is right about something, it makes sure that you know it was right about that, and so it's always building itself up, always strengthening its delusion to keep you happy and to keep you safe and to keep you buzzing along as you are. But to see it as it is to see everything as consciousness. Even the devotees, so even the dreamer, even the self, even that small self is composed of consciousness. Also, he says everything is consciousness. So there's our answer. Mind is part of everything. So mind is consciousness. So everything is consciousness. Very few people attain such love, right? Most of us aren't going to have that. So that's not really the goal. Right? The goal is to enjoy our work and to walk humbly with our beloved, to walk humbly with God. That's what we do. And that little bit, we try and minimize that egoism as much as possible. And if by grace Mother removes it completely, woohoo, we're one of the few. That's amazing and awesome. But if she doesn't, you're not lost. You just take that little bit that you can't get rid of and you turn it into God's friend or God's lover or God's servant, and so you worship with it. You do your karma yoga with it. You do your meditation with it. You do your practice with it, all of those things. And you subject it to your highest ideal. And then Mother will cover the rest when the body drops. Dr. Madhu, the love transcending the three gunas means, in other words, that the devotee is not under the control of any of the gunas, right? Because gunas are definitely going to be a component of mind, right? Because they're the ones creating Maya or providing the illusion of Maya. And so to mean that we're not under the control of gunas means that we have completely pulled our fingers of me and mine out of the mind. So we do not see any of the thoughts in the mind as being our thoughts or of referencing us, having anything to do with us. We've pulled our interest completely from mind. We've understood that's not who we are and not what we are, and that's creating our blind problem of not being able to see things. So we've pulled ourselves completely from there, and by doing that, we're no longer under the control of the gunas, meaning our moods don't bother us, the condition of our body doesn't bother us, all those little nagging things that we spend a good deal of our waking hours thinking about and remedying have nothing to do with us. So we've actually become pure witness at that point, pure observer. The master smiling, yes, that's it. Yeah, you got it, right? You got it. He becomes like a child, 5 years old, not under the control of any of the gunas, right? So he's not holding on to any of his grudges. He's not holding on to, not insisting on his needs. He's in the moment, and what's in the moment is interesting enough. So a child, you've seen that, Thakur uses that thing that the child, they could be angry with each other at one moment, and then you walk back in the room 10 minutes later and they're sitting there embracing and playing games together on the floor. It's like they don't hold on to grudges, and they're not under the control of the gunas. They're free souls. The master was resting after his noon meal. Mani Malak arrived and saluted him. Sri Ramakrishna remained lying on the couch and said a word or two to Mani. Mani, I hear that you visited Keshav Sen. Master, yes. How is he now? Mani, well, he hasn't recovered to any extent from his illness. Master, I found him to be very rajasic. I had to wait a long time before I could see him. The master sat up on the couch and continued his conversation with the devotees. To M, I became mad for Rama. I used to walk about carrying an image of Ramlala, which is just that brass image of Rama as a boy. I used to walk about carrying an image of Ramlala, given to me by a monk. I bathed it, I fed it, and I laid it down to sleep. I carried it wherever I went. I became mad for Ramlala. Right? So that's one of the ways of bhakti worship, is to take that image and treat it like it's in your care. To feed it, to bathe it, to put it to bed, to wake it up. And you'll see that quite often in the shrines in India, also at Bellarmont, where they'll close the curtain because Ramakrishna is taking a nap, or being bathed, or being changed, or having some food. Continuing on, we're now in chapter 17. M at Dakshineshwar. Right? Tuesday, December 18th, 1883. Sri Ramakrishna is seated on that in his room with his devotees. He spoke highly of Devendranath Tagore's love of God and his renunciation, and then said, pointing to Rakal and the other young devotees, Devendra is a good man, but blessed indeed are those young aspirants who, like Sukadeva, practice renunciation from their very boyhood and think of God day and night without being involved in worldly life. Yes, this is just really blessed, someone who had these inclinations since boyhood and just never got entangled in the world. That's the real blessing. Ramakrishna also makes the statement that, the person who can read it in the scripture and take it to heart and not have to experience it for himself, that person also is super blessed, that you can read the truth and know the truth without having to go out and prove the truth, right? That would save us a lot of fixing, because most of us, our spiritual lives, our spiritual practice is difficult, not because practice is difficult and not because realization is difficult, because actually the sages have the nerve to tell us that realization is easy, right? What makes it difficult is our insistence on our wrong habits that we've had for so long, that we're not willing to let go of them. We take a certain amount of security in them. We find a certain amount of safety in them because they're familiar to us. They may not be doing all good things for our life, but they're at least keeping our life familiar. And we're familiar with a little bit of impurity and a little bit of purity. And so that's what makes spiritual life difficult, is battling that wrong kind of thinking, battling those wrong habits that we've established. Otherwise, boom, we can all go home immediately. Mother says so. You can have this, you can have your realization this moment if you want it, right? Because it is and has always been and will always be a matter of grace. But as long as we have this ideation of responsibility and being the doer, our mind will hold us accused and will not let us escape so easily. The worldly man always has some desire or other, though at times he shows much devotion to God. Right? So showing devotion to God doesn't mean that we're not worldly. We can be very worldly and still be devotees. And Thakur gets that. And we're fine. Because when Thakur looks at us, when the object of our devotion looks at us, he sees our pure self. He sees that divine potential in there. Once Mathur Babu was entangled in a lawsuit. He said to me in the shrine of Kali, "Sir, please offer this flower to the Divine Mother." I offered it unsuspectingly, but he firmly believed that he would attain his objective if I offered the flower. So he's giving that example right there. You know, Mathur out of Babu, Mathur out of devotion was offering a flower, but it was offering a flower with a desire attached to it, which is an impure offering. That's why Ramakrishna made the point of saying I offered it, because I didn't know, meaning if he'd known that that flower was impure like that it had an expectation attached to it, he wouldn't have offered it, you know, because that's not how we worship. We worship through surrender. And so he offered it unsuspectingly, but he firmly believed that he would attain his objective if I offered the flower. What devotion Rati's mother had. How often she used to come here and how much she served me. She was a Vaishnava. One day she noticed that I ate the food offered in the Kali temple, and that stopped her coming. Her devotion to God was one-sided. It isn't possible to understand a person right away. Right? So that one-sidedness, that gets us quite a bit. You know, that's probably the bane of modern religious people, is this one-sided devotion. We can see God in our ideal, we can see God in our church, and we can see God in our scriptures, but hand us, you know, another representation of any of those things, and you know, we'll outright start calling it names and condemning it to the deepest pits of hell, you know. That's one-sided devotion, and that's not the ideal. The ideal is to see your beloved everywhere and to understand that we all have the same beloved. It was a winter morning, and the master was sitting near the east door of his room, wrapped in his moleskin shawl. He looked at the sun and suddenly went into samadhi. See, like that. He looked at the sun and you knew immediately. What is the sun? Was the first thing we worshipped, you know, that fire. And really, sun is the one quintessential thing. You know, I mean, it probably is, in some respect, the best symbol for God, because without it, nothing is, right? Without it, we all just, well, first of all, we don't loop around anything. We just suddenly fly off in some trajectory into darkness and basically all freeze to death. There's no life without the sun. So he looks at the sun and suddenly goes into samadhi. His eyes stopped blinking. He lost all consciousness of the outer world. After a long time, he came down to the plane of the sense world. Rakal, Hazra, M, and other devotees were seated near him. Master to Hazra. The state of samadhi is certainly inspired by love. There you go. Even samadhi's nature is love. Once at Siam Bazaar, they arranged a kirtan at Natavar Goswami's house. There I had a vision of Krishna and the gopis of Vrindavan. I felt that my subtle body was walking at Krishna's heels. I went into samadhi when similar devotional songs were sung at the Hari Sabha in Jorashanko in Calcutta. That day I feared I might have to give up the body. After the master had finished his bath, he again spoke of the ecstatic love of the gopis. He said to M and the other devotees, one should accept the fervent attachment of the gopis to their beloved Krishna. Sing songs like this. Tell me, friend, how far is the grove where Krishna, my beloved, dwells? His fragrance reaches me even here, but I am tired and I can walk no farther. Again, he sang, I am not going home, O friend, for there it is hard for me to chant my Krishna's name. Sri Ramakrishna had vowed to offer green coconut and sugar to Siddheshwari, the Divine Mother, for Rakal's welfare. He asked M whether he would pay for the offering. That afternoon, the master, accompanied by M, Rakal, and some other devotees, set out in a carriage for the temple of Siddheshwari in Calcutta. On the way, the offerings were purchased. On reaching the temple, the master asked the devotees to offer the fruit and sugar to the Divine Mother. They saw the priests and their friends playing cards in the temple. Sri Ramakrishna said, to play cards in a temple, one should think of God here. You know, and there's a real point to that. You know, like in your shrine room, in front of your shrine, sitting on your chair, you know, in all those particular places that you've set aside for spiritual practice, you should always be very careful to do nothing but spiritual practice or spiritual thought or devotional worship or whatever along those lines in that space. You know, I was told when you start a practice, you know, you should either have a room that you've set aside. If you can't do a whole room, then a corner. If you can't do a corner, maybe a closet. If you can't do a closet, then certainly a chair. You know, but whatever it is, and wherever you choose for the place of your practice, and you will probably all know this, but it's a good reminder, make sure that whenever you are occupying that place, spiritual thoughts are your purpose, because the mind, the mind follows habit. And if every time you sit in a chair, a particular chair, if every time you do that you meditate, then when you sit in that chair, your mind is going to incline toward meditation. So it's very good to have a space in your abode where you do your practice, so that when you go there, all the other habits of all the other things you do everywhere else aren't added to your mix of having to struggle to keep your mind calm. So really try and create a holy environment somewhere. And I think in last night's class, we talked a little bit about how to do that. You know, that you, of course, your practice there will do it for sure. But if you want to supercharge your shrine or supercharge your shrine room, then do something quite that takes a great deal of effort and focus. You know, go in there and spend some time writing your mantra for 1,000 times. You know, and keep that on the altar, either face down or folded up behind the picture or something as an offering. But do something very repetitive and something that takes a lot of effort and a lot of focus in your shrine. That can be also cleaning the shrine. You know, I used to love the feeling. I wish I could say I loved cleaning the shrine, but that was a lot of work. And in San Francisco, you know, we had that shrine in the monastery. Whenever we did a special worship for a birthday or something, we had about 8 or 9 hours worth of work. For one person, 8 or 9 hours. 2 people, 3 or 4 hours. But I had about 9 hours of work that I had to do in that shrine room of cleaning everything, whether it was dirty or not, everything. And just that habit of taking the blinds off of the wall, taking them in and wiping off every single one of the slats one at a time, you know, getting rid of all the grime, and then going outside and spraying up from the ground, and, you know, and then getting the big ladder so you could squeegee off the windows on the outside of the shrine. And then taking all of the old brass, we had tons of it, stuff that we never ever used, stuff I'd never used in my life was in that closet. We had to pull it all out, and you had to polish all of it. Then you had to put it all in fresh wrappings and put it back in the closet again for the next year. And that, you know, at the time, it was just work to me. I really didn't understand it. But I remember the first time that after doing that 8 or 9 hours of work in that shrine, that next morning when I got to be the pujari to do the actual worship, and I got to sit down with the knowledge that that room was spotless. All the flowers that I had picked and set everywhere, all the food that we had gathered and put on special trays and special plates, and all of that all set out like that. It was so grand and it was so beautiful. And just to sit there and feel like you could offer that, what a difference that made in puja. What a different feeling that was. How amazing that absorption was to be able to do a puja after putting in that kind of effort into preparation. And so if you want to supercharge your shrine, you don't have to do that all the time, because that creates an energy. If you do it even just once, that's going to last for quite some time. Your shrine will start to take on that special atmosphere of some place that's sacred, some place that's holy. So definitely do that. So don't play cards, all of that. Don't play cards in your shrine. To play cards in a temple, one should think of God there. From the temple, the master went to Jadu Malik's house. Jadu was surrounded by his admirers, well-dressed dandies. He welcomed the master with a smile. Why do you keep so many clowns and flatterers with you? Yeah, I love that. That level of honesty is beautiful, just beautiful. Why do you keep so many clowns and flatterers with you? Jadu, smiling. So he's, here's to be able to return a smile and after a statement like that is something. Smiling, oh, that you may liberate them. And everybody laughs. So what a classic little interchange is going on there. You can tell they're friends, you can tell they're close, you can tell they trust each other. All right. Beautiful. The master. Flatterers think that the rich man will loose his purse strings for them, but it is very difficult to get anything from him. Oh my God, this little example here is hilarious. But it is very difficult to get anything from him. Once a jackal saw a bull and would not give up his company. The bull roamed about and the jackal followed him. The jackal thought, there hang the bullock's testicles. Sometime or other, they're going to drop to the ground and I'll get to eat them. When the bull slept on the ground, the jackal lay down too. And when the bull got up and moved about, the jackal followed him. Many days passed in this way, but the bullock's testicles still clung to his body. The jackal went away disappointed. Everybody laughs. He says that also happens to flatterers, right? If you're hanging around with these rich folks hoping that they're going to give you something or you're going to get something out of it, he says eventually you're going to walk away. You're not going to get what you want or what you need. Jadu and his mother served refreshments to Sri Ramakrishna and the devotees. Yeah. Wednesday, December 19th, 1883. It was 9 o'clock in the morning. Sri Ramakrishna was talking to M near the bell tree at Dakshineshwar. This tree, under which the master had practiced the most austere sadhana, stood in the northern end of the temple garden. Farther north ran a high wall, and just outside was the government magazine. West of the bell tree was a row of tall pines that rustled in the wind. Below the trees flowed the Ganges, and to the south could be seen the sacred grove of the Panchavati. The dense trees and underbrush hid the temples. No noise of the outside world reached the bell tree. You can still go to these places. Not all the actual plants are still there, but all the spaces are still there where Ramakrishna did all of this practice. It's not jungle like it was in these days where he's talking about how everything is hidden because of the jungle all around. But it's been restored and it's been very nicely kept, and you can go there. It's just wonderful to see. You can take your gospel with you and read the different passages in the different places that he was, because as I sit and get to read this to you, when he's talking about the semicircular porch or he's talking about the Nahabad, it's like having been there, I can see all of those things. I know where all of them are. And then when you go and see it, well, that's an interesting experience. I love to hear people's accounts of that. For me, I just kept trying to believe it. I just couldn't believe that all the things that I knew from the gospel, things that were part of my internal world, I just couldn't quite transfer them to what I was looking at. Couldn't quite believe, that those things had happened here. But the degree that I could, it was amazing. It was like, wow, what a place. What a place. Master to M. One cannot realize God without renouncing lust and greed. M. Why? Did not Vasishta say to Rama, O Rama, you may renounce the world if the world is outside God? right? So this is a good example of using the scriptures to justify what you hope is true rather than rather than following what is true. So one cannot realize God without renouncing lust and greed. And why? Didn't Vasishta say to Rama, "O Rama, you may renounce the world if the world is outside God"? Master smiling. He said that to Rama so that Rama might destroy Ravana. Rama accepted the life of a householder and married to fulfill that mission. M stood there like a log, stunned and speechless. Right? He'd been counting on that verse. Sri Ramakrishna went to the Panchavati on his way back to his room. M accompanied him. It was then about 10 o'clock. M, sir, is there no spiritual discipline leading toward the realization of the impersonal God? Master, yes, there is. But that path is extremely difficult. After intense austerities, the rishis of olden times realized God as their innermost consciousness and experienced the real nature of Brahman. But how hard they had to work. They went out of their dwellings in the early morning and all day practiced austerities, all day practiced meditation. Returning home at nightfall, they took a light supper of fruit and roots. But an aspirant cannot succeed in this form of spiritual discipline if his mind is stained with worldliness in even the slightest degree. The mind must withdraw totally from all objects of form, from all taste, smell, touch, and sound. Only thus does it become pure. The pure mind is the same as the pure Atman, but such a mind must be altogether free from lust and greed. When it becomes pure, one has another experience. One realizes that God alone is the doer, and I am his instrument. One does not feel oneself to be absolutely necessary to others, either in their misery or in their happiness. Right? So this purification, this complete abnegation of self, that is the ideal. And that's the path. The path of Jnana Yoga, is generally the one followed in that practice. But this is why Ramakrishna tells us that in this day and time, that bhakti is the fastest and most direct route to God, because the path and the goal are the same. The love is that which is everywhere in that path. And it doesn't require the same level of inner or outer purity as the path of these other paths. Because of what Ramakrishna is talking about right there, that you can only see those things, know those things, when the mind has just nothing that's pulling it out. Right? There's nothing there pulling it toward form. There's nothing there pulling it toward separateness from the whole. Right? It's the perfect student. It's someone whose mind is just ready to go, and all the teacher has to do is look over their shoulder and say, "Thou art that." And they don't have to wonder anything. They know exactly what that means. And at that moment, they, boom, have their realization. So let's pause there for this week.